Hi, this is Brianna Clark, and I'm going to be talking about the poem One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. How do you feel when you lose something? Do you get angry or sad when you realize that you've lost the thing that mattered to you? How do you eventually get over it and move on? Well, according to Elizabeth Bishop's poem One Art, in order to become comfortable with losing things or people you care about, you have to endure losing less significant things and people. Some background on the poet is she was born in Worcestershire, Massachusetts. Her father died when she was very young, and her mother had to be in a mental hospital for basically all of her childhood, so she was left very lonely. In 1938, she moved to Key West, where she wrote many of the poems that eventually were collected in the Pulitzer Prize-winning North and South. In 1944, she left Key West, and for 14 years she lived in Brazil, where she and her lover, the architect Loura de Macedo Soares, became a curiosity in the town of Petrópolis. Soares took her own life in 1967, unfortunately, and that's actually a picture of her on the far right. And in the middle is a painting that was painted by Elizabeth Bishop, and it's a landscape of Brazil. And picture on the left is of Elizabeth herself. In this poem, Bishop is describing a tactic that she practices to get over losing things that had mattered to her once before. As the poem progresses, the things she loses become more and more significant because the smaller things she lost previously are preparing her to get over the things that actually matter. In One Art, Bishop has a repetitive style at the end of each stanza. The last line of each stanza is not exactly the same, but they still rhyme. An example of this is the art of losing isn't hard to master, and that is in the last line of every other stanza. And disaster and master rhyme, obviously, and those are at every other stanza. And this shows the rhythmic pattern that emphasizes how the art of losing has to be mastered and that you will be okay after you've lost something. One art is considered a villanelle because it loosely resembles an iambic pentameter, since many of her lines have a da-dum, da-dum, da-dum sound of iambic pentameter, but she allows her lines to have some flexibility, keeping them at either 10 or 11 syllables each. Elizabeth Bishop's mood in this poem leads me to believe that she has had trouble in the past with letting go of things she has lost, because the end of the poem confesses that it is hard to lose someone that is special to her. An example of this would be in the last stanza, even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. This quote is probably the most dynamic line out of the entire poem because she saved what was really troubling her until the end. She wants to portray a playful tone when she talks about losing someone who actually meant the most compared to anything else she mentioned before. She wants to prove that losing things is not actually as bad as you think. Also, the shift from a negative tone to a joking tone is what stands out in this part of the poem, because you would think that she would be the most serious about losing someone she loved, but in fact, she did the opposite. Elizabeth Bishop's background influences her writing in this poem, especially because she talks about her experiences with losing things and people. Since she traveled a lot and she writes about her experiences, this was most likely based on her life. An example of this would be, I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. The picture below is of the house that Elizabeth lived in Brazil, actually. And Bishop actually admits that she missed those places she owned before, which is different from the way she talked about the things she lost previously. As the poem goes on, you can tell that she is admitting She is admitting more and becoming more vulnerable as the things she's losing become more significant. Bishop's quick descriptions of homes and places are symbols of things that she has lost. These objects make a perfect segue into the last stanza, where she goes deeper than just places and material items. She talks about living without her loved one, which is the hardest to lose for her. She shifts to a material object to from a more from a material object to a more significant one. An example of this would be, I lost my mother's watch, and look, the last or next to last of 3 houses went. So basically she's going from something that is not worth as much to something that is worth much more, like a house. The title of this poem, One Art, perfectly describes the theme of the piece. Bishop is telling us that the art of losing is considered an art because it is not easily achievable and it has to be mastered. Also, she could be referring to the poem in a literal sense, because poetry is art, and she is describing the task of losing in a more creative way. Hence, the literal art of losing. In conclusion, One Art is meant to help the reader master the art of losing and letting go, but it also could be helping herself because she is sharing her personal experiences, but it is universal and it can apply to anyone because we all go through losing things and losing people.